Good morning and welcome to Strictly Business. I'm your host, Penny Font. This webcast features conversations with Louisiana's most influential CEOs, entrepreneurs, and community leaders, with the goal of providing insights, ideas, and inspiration to help you and your business grow. Strictly Business is brought to you by the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, Neighbors Federal Credit Union, and Exit Momentum. Without their support, this project would not be possible. Before we begin, here is a brief message from each of our sponsors.
The East Baton Rouge Parish Library believes that a thriving business community is good for us all. That's why we help entrepreneurs start businesses with tools like Gale Business Builder. Keep commerce rolling by providing access to computers, printers, and free Wi-Fi at 14 branch locations. Get a library card. Grow your business at ebrpl.com/business.
At Neighbors Federal Credit Union, we believe stronger schools build stronger communities. And with the generosity of our members and staff, we're making a difference. We've awarded 54 project grants, totaling over $220,000 for on-campus improvements. We've provided 99 scholarships worth nearly $300,000 to help dreams take flight. And through our mascot checking program, we've donated an additional $560,000 in unencumbered funds to local schools. Neighbors Federal Credit Union. We are neighbors helping neighbors.
I'm Cullen Talley, founder of Exit Momentum, a business coaching and strategic planning firm serving growing companies nationwide based here in South Louisiana. Our clients are already successful, but behind the scenes it can feel messy, leaders are too involved in the day-to-day, the team isn't fully aligned, and when honest, execution is inconsistent. We fix that. We build a structure, develop the leaders, and create systems that drive results so you can scale with clarity and momentum. If you're an organization already producing at least several million in revenue and ready to go to the next level with increased profits and team performance, we can help.
Thank you all. We want to keep Strictly Business as interactive as possible, so for those joining us live, here's an icebreaker question for you. Submit your vote in the comments and the results will be posted at the end of the webcast. Today, we're digging into what it takes to lead with clarity, purpose, and compassion, especially in the high-stakes world of healthcare. Joining me is Jodi, Chief Operating Officer of Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center. Jodi brings a unique background to her role with deep experience in marketing, communications, and executive operations. As COO, she's helping shape the future of cancer care in Louisiana by aligning strategy with execution and keeping people at the center of it all. Jodi, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Let's start at the top. So strategic communication isn't just about what you say, it's how you align people to a vision. For leaders, it's obviously one of the most important tools in the toolkit. And as someone with deep expertise in communications, how do you define strategic communication in the context of executive leadership?
It's such a good question because I do think when we talk about strategic communication, so often we don't take into account the influence that needs to happen. That you mentioned alignment, and I think that's a key component because if people don't understand the message or don't understand the vision, then they can't rally behind it, they can't move things forward. But if we can get people aligned on where we're headed and why we're headed there, how it can impact them, how it impacts our community, in our case, how it impacts patients and patient care. If we can align around that, some of the nuances of how we get there start to fade away and we get everybody kind of moving in the same direction.
So true. Why is strategic communication essential for effective leadership, and how does it influence organizational success?
I think a component of the success is, I'd be remiss if I didn't say a part of it is listening, because being able to gather that feedback and make adjustments. So obviously, we talked about alignment when you're setting a course of where we want to go. When things go off course or they don't go quite as we thought they were, or you hit those bumps in the road, go lives don't go as quickly as possible, or technology didn't work the way we thought it was going to work, a process needed a little tweaking, having that interaction with frontline team members so that they can provide real-time feedback and then listening and adjusting to that, though everything starts to go much more smoothly. We can make really good command decisions because we have that feedback. So I think part of that success in communications is also that listening component and being able to gather feedback, make adjustments in real time, and really focus on the people who are doing the work to help influence how the work is done.
Great insight. So let's look at it from a practical standpoint. What strategies can leaders employ to foster open and transparent communication within their teams?
Yeah, and I think this is one that constantly evolves. You know, I know, growth is obviously a piece of the Mary Bird puzzle as we talk about our strategic growth. We've evolved that communication strategy. We used to be a smaller team of 7 locations, and now we're at 23 across the entire state in a very short amount of time. So, where there might have been emails and some side conversations, we have to be much more deliberate in making sure that we're talking and listening to our team members. So, we've done things like town halls. We've done some integrative forums. We've pulled in leaders for leadership training and leadership interaction. So there's really a cross-functional approach to try to make sure that we're sharing information well and we're receiving information well. We adjusted our town hall approach from being kind of a delivery of information to what do you want to hear about? What's on your minds? What are the problems that you would like us to be focused on solving? Or what problems would you like to be empowered to solve? And we've gotten some really great grassroots feedback from our team when we just tweak that approach to be able to glean more information, especially as we were on our growth track.
I really like those ideas. How has your background in marketing and communications really influenced your operational leadership approach now at Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center?
I think it's really about bringing people into the process, allowing them to participate in the decisions that affect them and affect their teams. To be able to have that collaborative approach, I have found it essential. Because we can tell people what to do, but when we involve them and they help evolve the plan, the conversation, then they become advocates and ambassadors. Especially when we keep things focused on mission. We're an oncology organization. For us, it's a very clear mission focused on patient care and how we elevate that not only in our facility but in the community. How do we kind of rise all ships? So to be able to focus the team members on that approach and how what they're doing every day affects our community and our state, I think that goes a long way in helping us get to where we want to be.
That is a very powerful message. Can you share an example of a strategic communication initiative you've led that significantly impacted organizational outcomes?
We've done a couple of things that I think were helpful to the organization. We did some just-in-time messaging, especially when we were going through some of our growth situations, where we made sure that we brought everybody in. We do a webinar style information delivery. In advance of that, we always do a leadership style dialogue where we bring all the team leaders, so that as we deliver the information, they can have that interaction and dialogue to have the complete story. So then whenever we share with a broader group, if they go back to their leaders to question, they said this, I wasn't sure I understood, how does this affect us? That leader is posed to be able to provide more depth, more feedback. So having that touch base with leadership before we do a broad announcement or a webinar has been really effective in making sure that the nuances of the conversation, because so much of people's trust and dialogue in an organization is who they report to. How do they feel about their manager? What is their manager communicating about a project, a service line? And how that manager speaks about it is really the representation of the organization. So regardless of what I or even Dr. Fontenot, our CEO, says in a webinar or in a presentation, if that leader isn't able to articulate it as well or provide that depth and relevance to their team member, then it starts to dissolve. So I think a key component has to make sure that we're equipping them with the information they need to answer questions and continue that dialogue throughout our entire organization.
That's another really great idea for a large organization. In your view, what communication habits distinguish highly effective leaders?
I think it's that mission focus, whatever the mission may be for the organization, because when we talk about what we want to accomplish, how we get there can vary. How we get there can change. But if leaders and team members feel empowered that they know what the mission is, whether it's we're launching this service line because we know that it's going to have a great impact on patient care. We know there's patients in the community who don't have access, so we're going to bring this service line closer to them. If they understand that's the why, then how we get there can adjust, and they can help make those decisions and be empowered to make those decisions. So in my mind, that effective communication habit is really about always focusing back on the mission and the why behind what we're doing.
You noted the incredible growth that Mary Bird Perkins has experienced, and obviously organizations grow and evolve, and sometimes that means navigating tough transitions. So let's talk about communication in those moments of change. How do you handle situations where there is resistance to change, and what leadership techniques have you found effective?
Yes, I think I always have to say change is hard. It's hard for everyone. Every group, organization struggles with change. For us, we've had exponential growth in the last few years. With 23 locations, which I mentioned across the state, we've doubled the amount of patients that we're serving year over year, and we're on track to double it yet again in this next year. So obviously that puts a strain on the organization to some degree, but it also provides an amazing opportunity. Really leaning into what needs to change and evolve. I know I've had the experience of a lot of times the leader who wants the change, once it starts to happen, they're also the leader that's telling me like, this is too much. So you constantly having that dialogue on how we stay effective and communicate well so that we can embrace challenges and embrace change. I really try to focus on those leaders who there's always a group who enjoy the challenge, right? They want to take the hill. They're looking at what can we do next? How can we evolve? And trying to lean into their strengths. And then we need, there's always some people who are the detail-oriented people who are looking at some of the process and protocols. We need them because we need them to fact check. We need to make sure everything is running really smoothly. So it becomes this push and pull between these groups to move things forward, to make sure we're being effective and we're getting things done, but we're also paying attention to the small things so that the patient experience is at the level that we think they deserve.
You raise a good point in talking about the different personalities involved, and healthcare executives speak to a wide range of audiences, obviously patients, staff, board members, community partners. And as you noted, effective leadership means meeting each group where they are. So how do you tailor your leadership approach when managing diverse stakeholder groups, such as those I mentioned?
Yeah, I think one of the things I always talk to my leaders about is it's our responsibility as the subject matter experts or as the leaders, depending on the situation, to influence appropriately. So we need to be advocates for our ideas, for our patients, for our team members, and being that advocate, in the right room, in the right manner, to be able to respectfully but clearly define direction. I think that's one of the things I kind of push my team members to do. We want to challenge ideas. We want to challenge what is normal, what is standard. If we want to strive for excellence and want A players playing on the best teams, then we have to also expect them to speak up. So taking those messages to the leadership so that we're influencing the direction of oncology care in the state, we're influencing new service lines, new technology, new techniques. That's probably one of the things I think I challenge our team the most on. So we customize to our board, when we talk to our board is community leaders. They've come together, a lot of them providing financial support. They're donors as well as leaders in our community. For them, we're talking to them about quality. We're talking to them about what this means to the patient. What does this mean to the community? Making sure that we focus on the things that they're interested in. And also we deliver accreditations and quality standards to them so that they can measure us and say, yes, you are doing what we expect you to do because you have these credentials behind you. When we're talking to staff, we're talking about how do we push the needle? How do we keep our team members engaged? How do we make sure that every patient's experience is stellar and that we're taking care of not only them, but their family in a compassionate and meaningful way? So we just keep tweaking along the way to make sure that we're talking to them where they are and that we're aligning around a common vision.
I want to take that a little further with the frontline staff. How do you ensure they understand, and more importantly, are engaged with the organization's strategic objectives?
We roll out our organizational goals annually, and there's usually 2 or 3, and they're fairly simple, straightforward about, I go back a year ago, one of them was about scaling the mission, which I would say, check. The mission is scaled in a lot of ways, but once we said that, then we've evolved that to like building the foundation. As you look behind those goals, how do we start to make sure that every experience is superior and at the level we want it to? So we deliver those organizational goals annually, and then we drill it down by location, by area of expertise, by team member, to make sure how are they contributing to the overall mission of the organization, and how's what their daily work, how does that contribute against what we're trying to achieve organizationally and for our community.
That's awesome. Let's switch gears to the day-to-day. Operational excellence requires balancing systems, people, and results. And as COO, you're obviously in the middle of that equation every day. Can you describe a significant operational challenge you faced and kind of how you overcame it?
Cool. The biggest challenges we've had as we've grown, we've tucked in, partnered with other like-minded organizations, and our approach has been kind of that bold vulnerability, as we want to go into this with bold ideas and how we can transition, and whether it's on our grand scale or a piece of the puzzle, bringing people together to align around that vision. Well, as you can imagine, sometimes there's conflicting cultures as you take on new team members or new locations, or new partners with different, hospitals or healthcare organizations. So to be able to find that common ground, like what can we align on? Where are those pieces of the puzzle that fit together really nicely? And then be open and honest and transitional on making sure that we're additive to each other as we streamline. And that's the key component on the back end of that, is that streamline. We want to ensure that we're doing the same processes, that our protocols are at the same standards. And it takes some time to evolve culture so that we can assimilate what are the great things that they were doing before we got there, and how can we be additive to that so that we amplify and that we're not just removing pieces of the puzzle. So I think that's our line to walk as we've grown, and especially as we adapt and we bring in new partnerships and new team members, is like to get everybody aligned around the same mission and try to get rid of some of the nuances of how the cultures are different and focus on how we are similar and where we can align.
Makes a lot of sense. Speaking of change, healthcare technology is rapidly and continually evolving, obviously. Can you discuss your approach to integrating new technologies into existing operational frameworks?
Yes. And with technology, I always say it has to work for us, not us work for it. So it should flow into helping us solve problems that we have. We have a couple of partners, Electa from Radiation Oncology perspective. So we're looking to them for what's the next thing on the horizon to help support the latest, greatest technologies in the area. And then how can we support them in the sense of clinical trials, adding supportive education. We have a partnership with LSU Physics, so we partner on a lot of technology research that goes along with what we're doing. And obviously, when you're talking about research, technologies in that mix. Also looking at AI components to make the workday more efficient and easier. One piece of technology is we have a scribing, which basically is an ambient listening. It allows the physician to just have a conversation with the patient while it listens and absorbs all the information that's being shared, helps generate a note. That physician obviously still has that responsibility to go in and make sure that everything is accurate and to put the orders in, but just to eliminate some of the more tedious components of our physicians and clinical staffs day to day so that they can really focus on that patient and lock into that personal touch. And we use the technology to streamline some of that back end to make us more efficient.
Okay. You talked about external partnerships. How do you foster collaboration between different departments to achieve operational goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're constantly looking at ways we can improve. We've definitely done some realignment as well of the organization. As you can imagine, when you grow at that, I guess at that space and time, and how quickly we did that, we had to make some tweaks to make sure that our team members had a good span of control and were able to operate and function efficiently. So we did a lot of team building that was cross-functional, first by our geography, so location based, so that we make sure a location is really efficiently functioning and all the leaders that support that in that geography are communicating and working together. And then we did some kind of service line, so like-minded services across the entire network. So if it's infusion therapy services or radiation therapy services, we're having that group meeting to see how are people doing it differently. What are the things we can learn from each other? How can we collaborate to fix problems? Maybe a smaller clinic has a smaller process, but it's working really efficiently. Can we scale that in some of our larger locations, or vice versa? Sometimes our larger locations, they have a unique framework that they put together to manage their volume, and they're able to provide that to one of those smaller clinics, and it helps them to be a little bit more efficient. So constantly looking at, dividing up and restructuring how we tackle problems, and maintaining that dialogue and communication between the different groups is really essential.
So let's talk a little bit more about that growth. Mary Bird Perkins has obviously been steadily expanding its footprint across Louisiana and into Mississippi.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about what it takes to scale with purpose and precision. What operational strategies have been most effective in expanding that footprint across Louisiana and elsewhere?
Yeah, I love that strategic scaling with purpose, because part of what we've stayed hyper focused on is, where is there a need? Where is there a gap in care? Where are services lacking? Where has the burden of cancer grown to a point that we could come in and be additive? And also, is there a community partner that we could come alongside to make that happen? And that's how we approach our growth and how we approach partnerships, and then start to build that scalability. How do we scale it appropriately where we don't sacrifice quality, that we still get that personal touch that we want for patients? And so we start to adapt with that kind of bold honesty and transparency. When you approach those conversations with partners in new communities, being transparent on what we're trying to achieve goes a long way with local leaders. Everybody's wanting to support and help their community. And if we can do it where we define our roles really well, or that we're providing a niche opportunity and come along somebody else, I think we can get growth on all sides. So finding those mutually beneficial relationships that are additive to the community, I think that's how we really focus in on our growth strategy.
How do you build and align cross-functional teams to scale operations across multiple regions? I mean, that just sounds like a big undertaking. So talk to me a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, I think it's, not to be too trite, but like carefully, right? It's this process of mission focus. I will say one of the things we've done to really support our leaders as we go into new areas is we developed a project management team. We found that as we went live with different locations or different service lines, the leader who was in that area was running daily operations, we're troubleshooting buildings and facilities issues, sometimes turning on computers that weren't working, right? All those kind of daily things that our leaders have to do just to get the work done. And so when we added a project on top of it, although they had leadership scope, we were really burdening them with some of the daily process that need to happen to get some of these things live. So we brought in a project management team to come alongside them. So they're scheduling meetings, they're removing obstacles, they're scheduling in resources, they're doing go live support groups. I mean, So for them to come alongside that existing expertise of the leader to take some of those processes off of their list so that they can still focus on expansion and excellence and the care and daily operations, they can take some of that growth piece off of their list, get us there faster, open things more quickly, make us a little bit more efficient. So it's one of the key adjustments we've made in the last couple of years to really help our team grow at the pace effectively.
Yeah, y'all have obviously been very thoughtful about it. Um, in an increasingly competitive healthcare environment, how do you differentiate Mary Bird Perkins operationally? And also, what do you see as the next frontier of growth for the organization, and how are you preparing for it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I was in DC a few months back, and we were talking about the future of oncology and what was on the horizon for us. And what I was very proud to hear in the dialogue is, I'm sitting next to Dana-Farber, which is a multi-billion-dollar organization in Boston, and worldwide. And we were talking about the same items. We were talking about cellular therapy. We're talking about theranostics. We're talking about these cutting edge therapies for our patients that Mary Bird is bringing to the state of Louisiana. We're talking about clinical trials, and it was phenomenal to kind of walk that through. I found it confirming that we're on the right track. It's when we're on the same level of leadership as our national partners and players across the country, in making sure that regardless of where you live, if it's Louisiana or somewhere, in Baton Rouge or very rural in the state or into Mississippi, that you have access to the most advanced technology, precision medicine that you can in our area. We also work with other providers. We work with the area, but ultimately we want the standard of care for our state to grow and expand, whether it's in partnership with us or in partnership with someone else, but we want to see that for our community. And so our size at this point, we are at this point the leading provider of oncology in the state. That size gives us the opportunity to set a very high level and yet still remain agile. So we can look at how do we serve these rural communities? How do we go into the places that others won't go or haven't been able to provide care, aligning around screening services, clinical trials, and also community support. I think I would be remiss if I didn't mention the success of Mary Bird is really rooted in the community members who have come along to make significant donations. We brought in adaptive radiation therapy where in real time we can re-image somebody and then adjust the treatment plan to be more precise as we attack their cancer. That equipment, multi-million-dollar piece of equipment, was funded through donor support. So it's some of those things that when that doesn't have to come out of your operational budget, you can still operate, but add these things. Our community has been tremendous in supporting the growth of new service lines, technology. So that's also a huge piece of the puzzle in establishing a physics program, et cetera, to really make sure that patients are surrounded by care. So I think there's a lot on the horizon. I think we have high expectations for ourselves, but it all comes back to what we think the patients across our communities that we serve, what they deserve.
Jodi, it's been fascinating. I really appreciate all the insights you shared with us today, and thank you for walking us through your leadership playbook. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks also to our viewers for tuning in, as well as our sponsors, Neighbors Federal Credit Union, the East Baton Rouge Parish Library, and Exit Momentum for making this experience possible. Please join us again for the July 16th episode of Strictly Business. Until then, on behalf of our show's director, Tim Coles, and me, enjoy and make your day a great one.